Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Mardiega, still here on this live episode. If you couldn't catch that first part of the episode, I ran over some of the topics that Ryan Poles said recently at the NFL Combine going on this week. He mentioned Justin Fields, some of the talks he's been having with other organizations around trading for Justin Fields. Nothing too concrete as of yet, but it's still going on. That was in the first segment. Now moving on to the second segment, I want to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Almost a surprise, at least to me, last year because of how well they performed towards the end of the season and then into the playoffs. They surprised me just because, going into last season, there were some quarterback questions around Baker Mayfield. Was he, the franchise quarterback that he was drafted to be? He was drafted number 1 overall. And they had great talent offensively. Rachaad White, great running back. He proved it even more this past season. Mike Evans, an all-world wide receiver. One of the most underrated wide receivers, I think, in the whole league. Chris Godwin as well, another underrated guy that I think didn't perform as well as he could have this past year, but he definitely has a lot more to give going forward. They had a pretty decent showing from their offensive line, and defensively, they had 2 great linebackers, Devin White, Levante David, a great defensive line that they found some very good pieces in this past season or in last year's draft in Kalijah Kancey and Yaya Diaby. 2 guys are, I'm sure, going to be franchise cornerstone pieces for them going forward. Very fortunate to find them. And, of course, Antoine Winfield in the back end, holding it all down. They had a lot of talent. It was just a matter of putting it all together. And towards the end of the year, they figured it out. And they did pretty well, I thought, for the kind of season I was expecting them to have. But now you move on to this year, and a lot of talk has been made just within the division with the Falcons, the Panthers getting a new head coach and kind of, restarting the process over again with a new head coach. The Saints are always there. They're, haven't made any big moves, but they always talk about them. I've talked about them on this show. Restructuring contracts, just getting all their ducks in line before this season. And no one's really talked about the Bucs, I think. And I thought the Bucs are a very interesting team heading into this offseason because of all those talented pieces that I mentioned. A lot of them are going to be free agents, and the Bucs don't have endless money to spend on these guys. So there probably going to have to be some very critical decisions to be made by their general manager, by Todd Bowles, and, there might have to be a sacrifice or 2 in there, and they're going to really have to decide who they value more over the other going forward. And Todd Bowles was actually asked about it at the Combine a few days ago, and some of his comments were around Baker Mayfield. He said that he's a top priority for them. He fit in with the locker room very well. He improved his game over the last part of the regular season. There was a point in that regular season where they lost 5 out of the 6 or 6 out of the 7 games to start the season. It was really looking bad, and then he kind of turned it up. They went on a little bit of a winning streak. They were able to win the division, and I think Baker was able to turn a lot of opinions that he had on him just overall in his career, and just on last season, he was able to get a lot of more people on his side, get the fans on his side, and I think just because of his character, a lot of people might turn away from him. He might think he's a little bit too much, but when he's on your team and he's playing well, I think it could really get the fans to really like him, and I think that's what happened. So Todd Bowles re-emphasized that he is a top priority for them to come back this year, just based on all the positives that he created on the team. Obviously, Mike Evans is an unrestricted free agent. He's been, like I mentioned, an all-world wide receiver. Not really talked about too much, mostly because he's been on the Bucs and they haven't been very consistent over the last few years. But now he has a good season. He puts up another 1,000-yard season. He's still productive. Probably one of the most consistent wide receivers I've seen, at least in recent years. And any team that has him as a free agent is going to want him to come back. Todd Bowles said also in that interview that Mike Evans, he's been doing it for a decade now, and obviously we want him to retire as a Buck. They're doing everything that they can to make sure that happens. Their GM also touched on it as well, reiterating the same thing that, he said we want him to be a Buccaneer for life. They tried working out a deal before last season, but nothing really came about it, and now you're at sort of this breaking point, this fork in the road where something has to be done now, or else I'm sure any other team that is able to pay him will pay him. I've seen some reports around the Kansas City Chiefs being interested, and that's that's the last thing the Chiefs need for the rest of the league, right? To get Mike Evans on their team, but he is a very sought out player, and he is very talented still. He still has some good years left to give, and I think the Bucks should prioritize him above probably everybody else, because that leads me into Baker Mayfield, because everyone is always talking about the quarterback, the franchise guy, and if people don't think he's a franchise quarterback, that opinion is subjective. Just based on what I saw, I think he's given a lot of people in Tampa reasons to support him. He's giving them a lot of positives, benefits to keep him around. It looked like he had a great connection with Mike Evans there, at least towards the end. And their offense seemed to flow very well against the Philadelphia Eagles especially. They couldn't really get it done in the game against the Lions. But regardless, I don't think anybody expected them to go that far. And because if they did, Baker was a big part of it, as were Mike Evans. Those two guys are, almost go hand in hand. You hope to not have to pick between them, but that's only two of them. The other one could be just as, if not more important to them, being Antoine Winfield. He is up to be an unrestricted free agent as well, but he has the option to be franchise tagged. And, he's kind of entering the peak years of his career. He's only going to be 26, or he already is 26. And just off of last year, arguably their best player overall on their whole team, most impactful. He had 122 tackles, 6 sacks, led the NFL with 6 forced fumbles, and added 3 interceptions to that tally as well. And just the play that kind of epitomizes Antoine Winfield and his significance to this team is just in one game, I think it was against the Eagles, or it might have been the Falcons, that a receiver was running into the end zone, and he came out last second, just punched the ball out. It fumbled out through the end zone, and it ended up being a touchback in that game. And that, again, just summarizes everything Antoine Winfield's about. He's all over the field. If you ever watch him play, he is very active. He's always communicating. He's the quarterback of that defense, and I'm sure their general manager, Todd Bowles, being a defensive coordinator or a defensive-minded coach, he wouldn't want him to go anywhere. And at least they have that option to franchise tag him. He's a significant piece to this puzzle. So that being said, they're most likely going to franchise tag Antoine Winfield, just because I think he's in the price range of about $18 to $19 million for safeties, high-end safeties that, are at the top of the market, that have set the market already. The Jesse Bates and the Minkah Fitzpatricks. He's probably going to want something around that, and they're not able to do that as well as pay Mike Evans. So obviously, if you have the option to tag Winfield, the reports and just me saying it on the facts, he's most likely going to be tagged. But then you move on to other pieces that I mentioned before at the whole opening part of this segment, Lavonte David and Devin White. 2 other guys that are unrestricted free agents. And 2 guys at very different points in their careers. Lavonte David is going to be, or he is 34 years old. And, at this point in his career, he's such a household name in Tampa. He's probably the most he's the most equal with Tampa Bay. And because he's been there so long, because that's where he started his career, he's grown up there. He's been that player that always stuck around. You see players come in and out of Tampa just temporarily being pieces, but he, on the other hand, has stuck it out, has had some great successes, winning the Super Bowl, obviously, with Tom Brady while he was there, than sticking it out through a rough period. Baker Mayfield comes around, they have more success. He's been the leader of the entire team. But, age comes into effect now. The business side of it comes into effect. And I don't know exactly how much money he's going to want at his age and at, the point of career that he's in. But he even reported, or it was interviewed by somebody that reported it afterwards, that, he would love to retire as a Buccaneer. He finds it very hard to move on at this point in his career just because his whole life, like I mentioned, has been in Tampa Bay, that moving on, it just doesn't seem very plausible for him. If it had to come down to it, he said he might really think about retiring if the Bucs decide it's not in their best interest now to re-sign him to a new deal and make him come back with the funds that he might be asking for. So that's one question. And then right next to him, you have Devin White, who has been vocal about his displeasures in Tampa Bay before during the season. I think he actually asked for a trade or asked for something to be done during the season, and obviously that didn't happen. There were some times during the season where he was a healthy scratch from the lineup, from the defensive lineup, so that raised questions, and reports recently have said that Devin White is highly unlikely to receive the franchise tag from the Buccaneers. That was reported from Matt Lombardo recently, so just because there's that little bit of friction there, I don't expect Devin White to be coming back to the Bucs. He's probably okay with that. He's probably satisfied with not coming back just because the relationship hasn't been the smoothest as of late. And, he could benefit somewhere else. A lot of teams could benefit from his services. Teams that could definitely afford him because he is a lot younger. I think he's around 25-ish. And, he's a few years probably before he reaches his actual prime, 27, 28 years old, that he's probably going to look for a very lucrative high-end deal. And a lot of teams have money to burn like that, but the Tampa Bay Bucs obviously aren't. They're kind of binded by the players that want to be there, that they feel can really help them going long-term. And unfortunately for two of these guys, Lavonte David and Devin White, it might look like they're on the short end of the stick because a lot has been made around Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. That's always been really talked about with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And, my whole point around this, bringing this up and bringing up the division at the start of this segment was that, they have so many critical pieces that if they don't get right, some of them might not be as important as the other ones, but if they get one or two wrong, they don't get Mike Evans back and they don't get Baker Mayfield back, say, it could be very bad for them just within the division. The NFC is very close, and there's a lot of open opportunities for very different teams to make the playoffs. The Packers are just getting better. The Lions will be there. The Niners will be there. The Seahawks, with a new head coach, could be making some moves there, but we have to see how they pan out. The Cardinals are going to have Kyler Murray. They have a lot of picks in the first round, so they could re-up. They're not going to challenge that division most likely, but they're going to be more competitive because just they have the opportunity to draft with more picks that they've accumulated. And, the Rams are great offensively. Defensively, there might be some holes, but they could obviously address them in the draft. All these teams that are serious contenders, the Cowboys, the Commanders at number 2, all these teams are getting the opportunity to get better, and the Bucs are in a very delicate situation where if they get one, two things or nothing goes their way, they're stuck in a very rough spot where they've lost all the guys there, all that chemistry, all that familiarity with Baker, with Evans, Lavonte David, Devin White, that they have to start anew, look for new guys that fit this program, this system that Todd Bowles wants to run. And it's basically almost like starting over with no quarterback, no wide receiver one, just a running back that, has been good, but he can't do it all right now. Chris Godwin's still there, but he's coming off a very rough season, so you don't know how much better he can be, or if he could just keep going down. You don't know. That's a question that could only be answered in the season, but if they lose a lot of these players, they could really be set back a lot. And that's why I thought it was odd that nobody was talking about them, because nothing's really been done as of yet. This is a time where organization members get to meet with representatives. They get to talk it out a little bit more. And I mentioned in the last segment that March is usually when you see things start to pick up before free agency officially begins, especially for these high-end guys like Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans, that they're going to be very sought out after if their original teams don't do something about it. They want to do everything that they can, I think, to prevent them from even thinking about another team and signing these long-term deals. But, it's been pretty slow right now. The Bucs, in my opinion, if I have to give an order, I would probably prioritize Mike Evans first. I would try to get his deal done just right off the bat, because he can make a lot of quarterbacks a lot better than they really are. You could say he did it with Baker. That could hold some truth to some extent, but he's the one definitely I would hold first to get it done with. Then probably Baker. Just I feel like Baker, that feeling there is a little bit mutual. He's had a good run of things there. I think it'd be pretty easy to get him on the side of coming back. Then you kind of get to the guys like Winfield. I wouldn't include, just because I expect him to franchise tag him. So I expect him to be there regardless. It's not really a decision of keeping him or not. They obviously want to keep him. He's going to get a big deal, or he's going to get franchise tagged. Most likely get the tag. And then Lavonte David would probably go just above Devin White, because Lavonte David has done everything except scream into every single microphone that he wants to be with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You pick the guy that wants to be there or the one that's really unsure and would probably rather be somewhere else in Devin White. No questions there. I just think you have to hold off on paying a Lavonte David before you get to guys like Evans and Baker and Winfield, even if you are able to work out a long-term deal. If you can get a long-term deal for all three of those guys, I think they'd be satisfied with letting Lavonte David, unfortunately, walk away from the team. Not how he would have liked, but this is the business side of the NFL, and it could get to this point where you make tough decisions on some guys that hold the more sentimental, emotional value than these other guys. But we will see where that ends up. It's very interesting, just really picking out these teams that aren't really talked about, but they still hold a lot of important decisions out there that could impact other teams as well in free agency. But we'll put a pin in that for now. Later on, or coming up in this episode, I'm going to get to that Mecole Hardman and New York Jets issue that has kind of spun the whole NFL into a very critical point of the offseason. Very unexpected news for him to say on the New York Jets. Find out what he said, plus what I think of Stephen Jones' latest comments on the Cowboys surrounding their culture, their leadership. I'll give my thoughts on that after the break. You have been watching the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Don't go anywhere.